says that every time. One of these days I'll believe it. Wow. I'm a guest speaker. I've come here from far away over in Roseburg to visit with you today.
Hey, Larry. Move the camera up. There you go.
That's
That's good. Now we can see your face and not just your.
no, I can
That's
see
good.
it here too. So Daniel Webster, remember him?
Mhm.
Those of you who lived back in the 1800s, he was a statesman and a senator and a few other things. And he was an orator, a wonderful orator. One of his famous quotes was, "How much is all this worth?" I don't remember what he was referring to. Something they were going to do. Is it really worth it? So we can use that question. We can ask that question. And with a little bit different ending, we can say, how much would it be worth to know the purpose of life? How much would it be worth to have peace and a quiet conscience? Or how much would it be worth to be happy and eager to take the next step through your life? Just couldn't wait. Or how much would it be worth to be sustained in sorrow and sickness? How much would it be worth to have a solid faith that everything will be okay, even though we are looking out at the world and seeing a lot of chaos and contention? How much is all this worth? You might also ask, what would it take? What is the price for such priceless commodities? In Matthew, we read the words of Jesus. The kingdom of heaven is like a merchant seeing beautiful pearls, seeking beautiful pearls, who when he found one pearl of great price, went and sold all that he had and bought it. What is this pearl of great price? The kingdom of heaven. What is the kingdom of heaven symbol of? Well, among other things, it's a symbol of peace, our peace. So we have to turn now to a more modern guru and sage, Gary Larson. And he's got a cartoon I'd like to share with you. There's this island, it's Ernie on his island. There's one palm tree and he's sitting there and he's got his mind puppet, his little ventriloquist, like knucklehead, sitting there next to him. And there's a guy walking through the shallows coming up to the island. And Ernie says, "Oh, welcome, friend, to my island." And little Gus says, "Watch out. He's mad. He'll eat you if he gets a chance." And Ernie says, "Oh, ho, 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 ho. No, he's joking. No, none of that. No, I tell you, he ate that German fellow who came here last summer." "Shut up, Gus. So, friend, what's your name?" "He's mad, I tell you. He's mad. He's mad." Now, fun story, but it's a wonderful example of the teachings of Dr. Young when he talks about the masks that we wear and our shadow. So the mask is those things that we learn as we're growing up from our parents, from the authorities, things that we are taught are unacceptable. And so we don't use those. We put the things up that they say, this is what we're to be. This is how we're to act. We put these things up there. This is our mask. And then the things that we don't want to show, anger, frustration, jealousy, these things, oh no, that's not acceptable. Push it down in the shadow. So the mask is kind of like our public relations area, to act proper in front of people. Our shadow, it's the things that we experience that don't make us feel safe, that we feel for some reason are not good. And this shadow accumulates over time. Now, why does it accumulate? Well, because these things aren't released. They're held on to, and no, that doesn't exist. Push it back down in. Then there's grieving process. Perhaps you think this role of grieving is just too much for you, and so you push that down into the shadow as well. But these emotions, these feelings, these things that we aren't wanting to face, they sit there waiting patiently for you to notice them, waiting patiently to be healed, for you to feel them, to break through them into a greater state of wholeness and balance. So Dr. Young says, the persona, the mask, and the shadow, they have merit. If there's light, there's always going to be a shadow. The shadow, and that by working through these things that are in our shadow, we bring them into ourself instead of hiding them. It becomes integrated into ourself. We become a more whole, more harmonious. This takes courage. Now, so those things, they come up when they're triggered by frustration, anger, upset, and then suddenly the things in the shadow pop up. They go, oh my goodness, I had forgotten I ever even thought about that. And then there's those aspects of ourselves, which just aren't seen. So I'm repeating myself, but hey, do you get the idea? The shadow is all this stuff. So sometimes, since it's not there, we pretend it's not there. Sometimes then we take and we look out in the world and we see others, and other circumstances, other people, and we project our feelings that are in our shadow onto them and think that they're doing stuff. Like Simone used to say constantly, it's an inside job. Not them. It's never them. It's about how we react to our day. Eddie, that was a perfect example of this idea. I gotta tell you another way of looking at this. Imagine the flower is growing up out of the ground. It's got a long stem. There's a flower. There's dirt, and it's like an ant farm. You can see under the ground, and you can see all the roots there growing down in there. And in that dirt is manure. It's powerfully smelly. It's some form of death. But out of that decay, the seed breaks forth and shoots up out of the ground and creates a beautiful flower. Now, the manure is like our shadow. And inside of us, out of the shadow, out of those things that we are hiding, will make a beautiful, powerful seed come alive and grow up and become a flower. So I'm saying that our shadow is actually good for us, because out of that, as we accept it and integrate it into ourselves, it contributes to our spiritual evolution. This is what Dr. Young was saying. So you can't, you need the manure, you need the roots. You can't pluck the flower off and throw it away. No, it needs to be transmuted, not plucked off. And that is because God created us. And so he created the shadow as well as the flower. It's all God. And in that shadow, we'll find nourishment and strength. And in there is potential for growth. There's power in there. So if we take the mask off and drag it up out of the dungeon and embrace it, this is what I'm saying. Say, this is who I am. Suddenly, there's a healing. Happens every time. This thing I'm talking about with the shadow and the mask, taking care of this, It's part of the beginning steps of what the mystics call union with God. So let's talk a little bit about what Jesus taught about union with God. In the words of Paul, let that same mind be in you that was in Christ Jesus. What do you think the mind of Jesus was like? Do you think he had this mask that he wore? Do you think he had a shadow that he threw all the stuff he didn't want? No, none of that. When he saw that prostitute, he didn't see a prostitute. He saw a woman in need of healing. And he sat with her and supped with her and blessed her. The tax collectors, he didn't ostracize them like most people, but he sat with them and ate and talked with them. He didn't have a mask or a shadow. So if you can do that, if you can let go of this mask and this shadow, you'll be well on your way to the kingdom of heaven. Let's see what else Jesus said about himself. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. What does it tell us about Jesus? He was one with God, one presence, one. And in that oneness, he said, verily, I tell you, whosoever has seen me has seen the Father. Do you not believe that I am in the Father and the Father in me? Jesus wanted to get our attention when he said, verily, verily, I say, I just tell you. But he was telling us over and over through the scriptures that he and the Father are one mind, one being. And he said that we too have the ability to achieve what he achieved. In the words of Charles Fillmore, divine mind gives us a new light upon the life of Jesus of Nazareth and makes plain many of his seemingly mysterious statements. This spiritual consciousness, or Christ's mind, was quickened in him, and through it he realized his relation to first cause. His personality had been merged into the universal, yet he maintained no more than what he attained no more than what is expected of every one of us, that they may be one, even as we are, was his prayer. That's in Adam Smashing Power of the Mind by Charles Fillmore. So let's re-ask Daniel Webster's question. How much is it worth to have union with God? Once you're willing to give everything in exchange for it, then what do you do? What is the process? And this is where talk a little bit about the Baha'i faith. They have part of their religion, this the process they talk about. It's called the Seven Valleys. So we're going to tell a story. This is the story they tell. There are thousands and thousands of birds, and these birds decided that they want to go and find their king of kings who will tell them how to be happy and at peace. Okay, so there's a bird. Oh, yeah, I got to bring up this. This is the Persian culture. And in the Persian culture, this king of kings is symbol for that is the phoenix. Now the phoenix, they came back to life, overcame death. And in Persian, phoenix is the word Seymour. So these thousands of birds decided they wanted to go find their Seymour to find out how to be happy and peaceful. The hoopoe tells him how horribly difficult this journey is going to be. And when he does that, most of the birds start saying, oh, the partridge says, oh, I love the smell of a rose. I cannot leave the rose. I will stay here. And the quails are saying, oh, I've got to get grain for my children, make sure they're okay. I could never leave them and go on this journey. And they all started making excuses. And when they were done, there were only hundreds of birds left, not thousands. So they started on the journey, and they started towards the first valley, first of 7 valleys. And they worked their way through this. But we won't go through the process. It would make an interesting lesson sometime to study the Baha'i ideas, because they're very close to what Jesus taught. So they're there at the end, the seventh valley, and there's just birds flying there, and they're just falling out of the sky and like flies because it's so difficult, this last part. But they get there and they are at the mountain, at the end of the seventh valley, and in the chamber inside this mountain is their king of kings, a Seymour, who's gonna tell them how to live and be happy. And they go in there and they find just a gigantic mirror, nothing else. Now, what is this all about? All this work, and all they find is this mirror that, okay. So I'm going to tell you something about the Persian word Seymour, phoenix. If you split it into see more, it means 30 birds. 30 birds. And what they realized that the mirror simply was that what they were seeking all this time was really their own reality, looking at themselves and seeing the divine reflected back. Now I told you about the shadow. Now I told you about the light of God. The light is knocking at the door of your mind, saying, will you let me express through you? You see, in every single moment in time, in this present moment, there is an eternal cosmic kaleidoscope of creation. I love that phrase. I heard a speaker use that, and I'm using it from now on. I love that. Eternal cosmic kaleidoscope of creation. And it exists right now, right here. And it is evolving through each one of us. Always growing, always unfolding, always progressing. And it's forming and then it's letting go. Forming and unforming. That's the process of creation. When we try to hold on to that is unforming, the shadow, it causes us difficulties. The secret is to let go, to let divine order take over and direct you in how to have a healing. It is not our doing. It is not our might that has to be used to pull something into manifestation. It is the very nature of divine mind. That is the eternal cosmic kaleidoscope of creation to create. It has to create. It is eternally creating. In this moment, it is all power that has ever been. It is all the wisdom of the ages that has ever been. The Alpha and Omega, everything. It is moving. It is moving mountains, and it can move mountains within your mind about who we believe ourselves to be and what we are capable of doing on this earth. We only need to invite God in and allow Him to make the change. Now, in the seventh valley, let's talk about that. The door to the chambers before you, where you'll find your king, hoping to be given peace and happiness. But if you remember the story, that's not the point. You go there in order for the king to show you how to have peace and happiness, not just given to you. When you reach the seventh valley in that chamber, your journey in many ways has simply just begun. Nonetheless, reaching the seventh valley is a victory. You will feel such a shift in awareness that you'll swear you entered a new world. And in this new world, there is a presence felt at all times. It is the phoenix, the king. And the king's instructions will not be in words. It will be the king's presence filling you, doing the final cleansing and healing of your psyche, renewing your soul, so you can enjoy the natural state of the human. It is a natural state for us to be happy, to be joyful, to have a pleasant life. What do we need to do? Well, I already talked about it. Let go. Let go of the shadow. Embrace it. Say, oh, this is who I am. Well, you know, embrace it. When you do that, it transmutes. But be patient, because it takes time. Emmett Fox said this: prayer is the only real action in the full sense of the word, because prayer is the only thing that changes one's character. A change in character or a change in soul is a real change. When that kind of change takes place, you become a different person, and therefore, for the rest of your life, you act in a different way. Now, this next quote is from a man named John. Union. It's kind of like you invite God into your house as a loving guest, honored, praised, and over time, your house becomes the house of God, and you dwell in the house of God forever. Now listen to this next part. The nourishment, instead of coming from your own mind, so to speak, comes from God. The thought comes from God. You're maintained by the thought of God, the love of God. And it also turns out that you cannot be occupied by perfection and not become as perfection is. But it takes time. So be patient. George Fox, the founder of the Quakers, said this. We're getting three different people here, all saying the same thing in their own way. The Lord showed me, so that I did see clearly that he did not dwell in these temples which men had commanded and set up, but in people's hearts. His people were his temple, and he dwelt in them. So a union with God is not reached by our might, not by our will, but by aligning with this internal creation that wants to come forth. It wants to move through your life. It wants to move through your mind, through your heart. It's a natural order of things. We merely need to align ourselves and allow this to come forth. Not by pushing, but by being present, by allowing the energy of God, the wisdom of God, the power of God, the prosperity of God, and the presence of God, the peace of God, the patience of God, to be you, to be alive in you. This is your moment, this moment, and every moment that follows. Can we let that mind that was in Christ Jesus be in our mind? Yes, we can. Yes, we can. For the meditation, let us set the mood with some deep breathing, quieting your mind. I like to read a verse from the Bible, from Isaiah, which is quoted quite often by the Quakers, which is George Fox was the founder of. And it's about waiting upon the Lord. To wait upon the Lord means to sit in silence. This is why the Quakers meditate in silence. They are waiting upon the Lord. Do we wait upon the Lord when we meditate? Quote, but they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings of eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint.